This week on Quality Digest Live, learning lessons about customer satisfaction from Mark Hoplamazian, CEO of Hyatt Hotels.
Plus, we find out about the special challenges and opportunities facing electronics manufacturers. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for October 19th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. All right, leading off the news this week is a story from Reuters that we linked to in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily titled, U.S. Manufacturers to Train Veterans for Factory Jobs. 4 leading U.S. companies, General Electric, Boeing, Alcoa, and Lockheed Martin, will provide financial support to the Get Skills to Work coalition. The initial goal is to train 15,000 military veterans in the high-tech skills necessary to work in the manufacturing sector. After the training is completed, the veterans will go to work for one of the 4 sponsoring companies, or they'll be matched with other appropriate jobs. The program is being managed by the Manufacturing Institute, which is affiliated with the National Association for Manufacturers, NAM. Training begins this January at Cincinnati State Technical and Community College near a major GE aviation facility. So again, Dirk, this is a great opportunity. We've talked about it a lot to get people to work, get people excited to work in manufacturing. And this is a great use of the skills. Veterans, military veterans have some amazing skills.
Well, yeah, they have a lot of amazing skills. I mean, not only are they trained in specific types of jobs, depending on their specialty, but also as a lot of, if you've heard interviews with employees that hire back vets, they've also got a lot of leadership skills as well. Leadership, and they know how to work as a team, because if you're in the military, working as a team is what it's all about. So they come in ready to go, at least culturally. They come in ready to go in a work environment, and very often also the skill set is already there too.
Already there too, and skill set you talk about is an important part of this, because there's a little debate about what's known as the skills gap, and the article, the piece talks about the skills gap a little bit. Now, is it real or is it imagined? Well, for some skills like welding, arc welders or machinists, without question, there's a definite need for that. But as the story indicates, welders and machinists, that's only a small percentage of the manufacturing workforce. And manufacturing alone is only really a certain percentage of the American workforce. So is there a skills gap? Is there not? Well, we're not sure, but we do know that there will be a skills gap without question as we go forward. We know that people are retiring. And the other thing that the story mentions at the end, interesting, is compensation issues. You know, there's a lot, and maybe this feeds into this idea that there's a lot of jobs available, because manufacturers want a lot. They're asking a lot of skills for somebody walking into maybe a $15 an hour job. Now, that for some parts of the country, $15 an hour is fine, entry level. For other parts of the country, maybe in high-tech corridor, Silicon Valley, it may not be that attractive for $15 an hour. So there's a lot of issues going on. This story, which is right below the player page right there from Reuters, talks about it. Check it out, read it. Good information to have.
So are they saying that there may not be, for vets coming back in and looking to plug into the workforce, are they saying that the compensation may not be what they're looking for? Is
that's part of it? That's part of it. Is that, and just in an overall perspective, there may need to be an adjustment. If manufacturers are really saying that they need these people, they may need to step up a little bit within the structures of their budgets and maybe raise those entry-level jobs a little bit more in terms of the compensation.
Exactly. Okay, well, here's a bit of quality news from the medical community. Kaiser Permanente, that's the big HMO, leads the nation with the most number ones, receiving top marks in 16 out of 40 effectiveness of care measures among all reporting commercial health plans. This is according to the 2012 National Committee for Quality Assurance's Quality Compass. Quality Compass is from the NCQA, National Committee for Quality Assurance. Amongst its number ones data, Kaiser Permanente received top marks for, and this is just a few, breast cancer screening, comprehensive diabetes care, several different medication management categories, nutritional counseling for children, medical assistance with smoking cessation, and as I said, several more. I believe there's 15 or 20 things that they got. Oh, well, 16 is what they said, right?
Yep.
It's close to 16 or 20. This recognition by NCQA is just the latest in a string of national recognition that Kaiser Permanente has received in the past several weeks. And in mid-September, NCQA ranked Kaiser Permanente's 3 largest health plans with a total membership of more than 7 million as the 3 top Medicare plans in the country. Shortly thereafter, the Joint Commission, JCO as it used to be known, named 20 Kaiser Foundation hospitals top performance on key quality measures. So good going, Kaiser.
Yeah.
So a lot going, and you know, there's a lot of, you're seeing this also showing up a lot in mainstream news where there seems to be kind of a growing recognition. Obviously, we cover quality and quality in healthcare quite a bit, but you're also seeing this show up in mainstream quite a bit where the mainstream media is beginning to realize that, look, there are quality measures out there. There are healthcare organizations, hospitals that are trying to step up the game and starting to incorporate quality measures into their overall way they run the company in order that they can track things. NCQA obviously is a big motivator behind this because being able to get recognized by NCQA is a big deal. Baldrige as well with the healthcare plan, the healthcare coverage that they've started about 10 years ago, where they included healthcare in there. All that is really starting to raise the game for healthcare organizations. It's a good thing.
And if you look at it, you look at the particular categories in which Kaiser Permanente was.
A lot of them are preventative.
A lot of them are preventative. A lot of them are really important. Think about things like smoking cessation. Think about nutritional information for kids, right? These are things that are going to really carry forward, not just in terms of, hey, it's great for our customers because we want people to be healthier, but in terms of the costs down the road. You know, if you can get on to childhood obesity, huge issue for the future in terms of healthcare costs. If you can get on that, that's a really key area for us.
And I think the other thing is that caught my attention is that so many of these measures were preventative measures, which is really where you want it. I mean, sure, being able to reduce errors in operating room and all that, and increase throughput in emergency rooms, all that's important. But really, you don't want people going to the hospital to begin with.
Get it upstream.
Get it upstream.
Good stuff. Good work there by Kaiser Permanente. Congratulations for that. And finally, in the news this week, ISO announced a brand new standard, ISO 10018, Quality Management Guidelines on People Involvement and Competence, which means, well, it means just what it says. It's a framework for competence and human resources and how to use really ISO 9001, how to get the best out of the human elements in your organization, the squishy-ware, if you will, and how to manage and implement ISO 9001. It's about time. I mean, we talk about so many standards and we talk about so many things that ISO and other standards bodies do to ensure compliance to things. Well, the human element, people need to understand what processes they need to do, and they're certainly within ISO 9001, for instance, you get that. But this is a standard devoted just to a framework for how you do that stuff.
How you deal with your people.
So really, really important. So for more information on that, visit online at ISO.com or click on the story link just below. All the story links that we have today, of course, they're just below the player page, so click on that.
Okay, so let's turn now to our first feature article of the week, which really puts the human element front and center, quantifying the value of customer service, which appeared in Tuesday's issue of QDD, and it comes to us from the great team, Knowledge at Wharton. And Mike, I think you thought that was a pretty interesting article.
I did. Knowledge at Wharton. Of course, we get a lot of great content from Knowledge at Wharton. And that appeared, I think, in Tuesday's issue or Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And it talks about an interesting guy, Mark Hoplamazian. He's the president and CEO of Hyatt Hotels. And Hyatt Hotels is a 2-time Baldrige winner. And Mark Hoplamazian had a pretty interesting road to the top spot at Hyatt. He was a financial guy. He was a financial guy at the Pritzker organization. And the Pritzker organization is the parent company of Hyatt Hotels. So Mr. Hoplamazian was a financial guy. It was his background, and he was tabbed for the top spot as an interim CEO and president of Hyatt Hotels about 6 years ago. An interim, of course. While he was doing that, they kind of brought in some other people and looked at it, and they decided very soon in his tenure that he was doing a pretty darn good job, and they took the interim tag away, and 6 years later, he's still rocking and rolling there as the top guy at Hyatt, very successful organization. Now, he had to really grow into this job. Again, as I mentioned a couple of times, comes from a financial background, did not have a lot of management experience, but that led him to do something that we all want to do, which was ask stupid questions. He said, hey, I've never done this. Me too. I mean, I do it every day, every hour. You know, he said, I've never done this. It gives me the freedom to walk in and ask questions about anything. I don't have to assume, and the team members don't have to assume that I know it all. Right. We can go in, I can ask whatever questions I want. We all know there are no stupid questions, right? Especially if the CEO doesn't understand something, he's got to understand what's going on.
It takes a bit of humility to do that too, I'd say.
It does, and there's a couple of things. This is an interesting guy, Mark Hoppelmaisie, and you get a lot of his flavor from this piece from Knowledge of Wharton. He's an interesting guy. He's got a lot of humility. You can tell from the piece, just in how he approached it. And again, when he came into the job without this background, he had to kind of quickly get on his feet, because quantification of customer service metrics in the service industry is difficult. You know, you can do scaled surveys, and people do, and they do, and they're still gonna. But it's difficult to know if what you're doing is really working. So one of the first things he did is he went to other service industries, other top managers of service industries, and one of the examples is enterprise rent-a-car. He went to the enterprise top management and he said, well, hey, what do your experiences tell you? What's worked for you guys? And the first thing he found out was an old chestnut. You never get a second chance at a first impression.
Right.
That what they told him was that the first person that a customer sees, in an enterprise's case, whether that's on the lot or whether it's a customer service call or the customer desk, whatever it is, that first impression counts the most of anything else. And none of the employees know if they're going to be the first line of defense. So every employee's got to buy into that. Every single employee has to know that they're responsible for the success of that organization. The other thing I'm going to get back to that in a minute.
Okay.
The other thing he did was he looked at this idea of these scaled surveys, okay? And what Enterprise told him was that scaled surveys work algebraically, not geometrically. What do I mean by that? Take a 1 to 5 scaled survey, okay, with 5 being the best.
Okay.
Now, you could look at that and say, well, there's 20% gradients between those categories. That's certainly not the truth.
Yeah, right.
Somebody who gives you a 5 is three times as likely to come back as a customer than somebody who gives you a 4. Somebody who gives you a 4 is twice as likely to come back as somebody who gives you a 3. So, moral of the story, you got to get those 5s. If you're in a hospitality business, you've got to get those 5s. And again, every employee in the organization is responsible for doing what? Getting those 5s, right? He tells a great story, and I want to actually show it because I want to read this to you. He tells a great story about NASA in the 60s, and I'm going to read it to you right now. Hoppelmaisie says, I was reminded of what may be an apocryphal story about someone seeing a janitor at NASA and asking him what his job was. The janitor said, I'm putting a man on the moon, which was, I feel, the right answer. That's brilliant. Right. That is exactly what it is.
I'm part of this team, and I'm putting a man on the moon, just like the guys who work in the control room.
The control room, or the astronauts themselves. That's a great point. And you know what that speaks to? That speaks to the fact that everybody in Hyatt, everybody in NASA, and the people in Hyatt felt like they are responsible for the big, hairy goal of the organization. In the case of NASA, what was it? Putting a guy on the moon, right? In the 60s. In Hyatt, it's winning Baldrige Awards, and it's not just satisfying customers, because satisfying customers is just the baseline. It is delighting customers. And if you delight customers, you can't just wait for them to tell you what they want. Right. If you wait for them to tell you what they want, you're going to satisfy maybe if you do what they want. But if you anticipate and if you know what they want, and if you're jumping on that properly, you're going to delight your customers. And that's how you're going to get those 5s. You're going to delight your customers rather than just satisfying them. Let's get back to Hoppelmaisie for a minute and who he is and look at, again, what he did here when he stepped into this position. Had a lot of humility, asked a lot of questions. Didn't just ask questions, listen to the answers. Right. We always talk all the time about asking questions. And
it doesn't do you any good if you're not listening to what people are telling you.
Yeah, if somebody's giving you some good advice.
Yeah, thanks for your opinion, and now I'm
going to do what I want to do anyway. Yeah, that happens all the time with top management. It happens all the time with everybody. And I think the humility, and again, the background of not assuming that he knew, because he's a financial guy. He's like, I don't never manage a company like this. 90,000 employees at Hyatt. 90,000 employees, that's a pretty daunting task for somebody to walk into. But he asked questions, he listened to answers, he listened to his customers, he listened to his team members, and he implemented. He implemented what the consensus said. He made the decisions, obviously, he's the top guy. But he implemented the changes that needed to be implemented, and he made the organization better. They're two-time Baldrige Award winners. They're doing something right. And I think there's really good lessons in this story for anybody who wants to learn about how to improve your organization, especially in a service or a transactional environment. So take a minute. Check it out. The link is right below the player page as well. Knowledge at Wharton is the source. We get a lot of great stuff. From Knowledge. Yeah,
good. Like if you want a really wide variety of good stories, knowledge at Wharton. Good stories in there.
They're the ones, yeah. So check that out, and thank you to them, and thank you to Mark Opplemazian for doing some great work that we can all benchmark against.
Right. Well, here's another feature story that caught my attention because I think probably because of the usefulness of it, particularly if you work in the electronic industry. So, as any of you who work in the industry, you know that there's probably no industry that moves faster in terms of, let's say, products and new technology than the electronics industry. And in part, this is because of Moore's Law, which still holds true. And Mike, what's Moore's Law?
Moore's Law, that space doubles, that capacity doubles every, I think it's 18 months for semiconductors.
Right.
And it's amazing that
it's held true for
50 years now or
decades.
So. It's amazing.
So part of what goes on in the electronics industry is partly because of Moore's Law, and also because more and more electronics have become software-based. So new products and applications come to the market at a remarkable speed. You just have to look at your iPhone. I'm sorry, not your iPhones. Well, iPhone's one, but look at your smartphones.
Yeah.
I mean, every few months there's new features and new models coming out. So along with this innovation and speed, regulation has to keep up. Consumer safety almost always lags behind innovation, so regulation is almost always playing leapfrog with the electronics industry. And the electronics manufacturers have to be aware of what is coming down the line in terms of regulation. So, for example, let's look at a few of these things. Let's say hazardous substances. If you sell products in the European Union, you have to be in compliance with RoHS. That's the Restriction of Certain Hazardous Substances Act, which applies mostly to electronics. The intent of this law is to make sure that toxic substances like heavy metals and the like don't end up in consumers' hands and eventually in landfills where they're causing some real health problems, particularly in China. Stan Slott calls this the new farmer.
Yeah, that's right.
The new farmer, according to Stan Slott, who is one of our columnists and works a lot with hazardous substances, the new farmer is those people, particularly in third world countries, who are out farming electronics. They go and they scavenge dumps and looking for electronic parts to resell.
Because they know there's money in them.
There's money in it. And unfortunately, a lot of those things contain these hazardous substances.
And by the way, RoHS has some pretty tough regulations in Europe, particularly. I mean, we've heard stories of people getting fined millions and millions of dollars.
Well, not just fines, but actually there can be, for some EE regulations, there actually can, and RoHS, I believe, is one of them, there can be actually criminal charges. So, and looking at RoHS just real quick, I mean, if you're not familiar with it, there's 6 or 7 banned substances in RoHS, and they're planning on adding more substances to that list. So you have to be aware of RoHS-like registration, not only in the Europe, but also the United States. You have to be aware of national, let's say, EPA regulations. You have to be aware, in some cases, of end-of-life product disposal laws. There's all these things you have to be aware of so that you're not designing products that contain substances that could be banned in the future. So how do you keep on top of all this? Well, I'll get to that in just one second. So, okay, let's say hazardous substances, but what else? Well, maybe you work in the electronics industry where you're creating innovative devices for, let's say, medical products. The emerging, how do I say it?
Easy for you to say. Emerging.
Wireless health arena. That's why I have him here.
Hey, you know, I got to do something.
Anybody? What was the little Andy McCarthy? What was that? It was created. The health arena, the wireless health arena, has created an entirely new category of electronic devices that combine wireless and medical functions for a variety of health and wellness applications. Now, remote monitoring of healthcare is one of the kind of one of the applications, but it spills over into epidemiology, medical records, communications, diagnostic tools. All of this is stuff that is coming out of the medical device arena, and a lot of this is implantable stuff. Even we're talking about wireless devices that are implanted in the body, so that rather than having wires coming out to monitor certain functions, it can be done wirelessly. Well, obviously, when you're talking about medical devices, you're talking patient safety and in some terms confidentiality issues, and of course there are regulations that play into all of those. So again, how do you know what affects what kind of regulations are going to affect your product? And finally, we'll just do this really quick, green. If you're, everybody is jumping on the green bandwagon, all you have to do is drive down your street and see how many hybrid vehicles see out there, see how many photovoltaics you see on top of rooftops, go through almost any store's organic food section and you're going to see green products. So again, how do you stay on top of green regulations? Some of them which are maybe just driven by your consumers who want green products, but some of them again are regulations. We mentioned RoHS. There's also, let's say, Energy Star, which is a requirement for certain types of products. So if you work for a large organization, you probably have a bunch of suits whose only job is to keep on top of regulatory compliance. That's their full-time job. Legal guys, compliance guys, researchers whose only function, and I'm sure if you work for a large company like Dell or Hewlett Packard or Tektronix, any of these guys, you have people who that's their only job, making sure that you don't run afoul of regulations, either current regulations or, this is more important, regulations that may be working their way through the regulatory system and haven't passed yet, but will.
But will, because we know how long these tails are. We know how long the tail of an R&D system can be. You might be designing something now that won't be even hit the shelves or won't be for sale for, what, 18 months in some cases, right?
And if you're a large company, you're probably on top of it. But what if you're not a large company? What if you're a small medical device manufacturer, or you're a small, just electronics manufacturer? Maybe you manufacture electronic toys or toys that have electronics in them. Really the way to do this, and this was kind of the purpose of this particular article, which was written by TUV Rheinland. Obviously, they got a dog in the game here. TUV Rheinland is a testing lab.
Among other things.
Among other things, registrar as well. Kind of the easiest way for a small company, since your product's going to have to be tested at some point anyway, more than likely, is to partner with a testing lab like TUV Rheinland or any of the others that are out there. There's lots of them. UL, just drop a name there. UL is very famous in the United States. Electronics, I have personal experience with UL, is you stay on top of with them as your partner, you stay on top of what is going on in the regulatory industry. So if you're partnered with, let's say, TUV Rheinland, they're in touch with their counterparts in the EU, in Asia, in India, and in the United States. They know what's coming down the line. So not only are they able to test your product to meet current regulations, but somebody like TUV Rheinland can also be telling you, hey, by the way, heads up, here is what's going through, here are what's coming down the line maybe for RoHS in the future. And yeah, you're passing the standard in terms of these 6 or 7 substances, but here are 7 more that may be added in the future. I notice that you have this in your product. You may be wanting to look at designing that hazardous substance out of your product so that in the future, if this does go through, you're going to be on top of it. And pretty much any large-scale registrar, testing lab, certified body is going to be able to provide that service for you. So as a small company, you should be looking at partnering with these guys to make sure that, and matter of fact, I would say you would want to make sure that you, particularly if your product is sold internationally, you would want to partner with a testing lab or a certified body that does have tentacles around the world, because they're going to be more in touch with what's going on. And that's really the way I'd stay on top of it.
And there are a lot of local and regional parameters. There's differences from region to region, even from state to state within the United States. There's differences in terms of what's allowed, what's not, what's going to be allowed, what's currently up for legislation. There's changes that are going on all the time.
And I'll say, because I mentioned I have personal experience, it was when I worked in electronics, it was an industrial electronics company. We sold really high-end perimeter security stuff for military installations and nuclear facilities, that sort of stuff. But we did have a client at one time who required that the entire system and all the components be UL listed. And we had to go through that testing process. And I'll tell you, unless you're partnered with the company that's doing the testing and know all their ins and outs, you could hire a consultant. And that's another way to do it. You definitely don't want to try to do it on your own. Nope. Testing is expensive. As any of you have done it, having to test to a safety standard in particular, whatever the safety standard is, whether it's electronic safety or radiation safety or whatever, is an expensive process. You only want to do it once.
Yep.
Because if you fail the test, you can go back and be tested again, but you're going to have to pay for it again. So you really want to partner with somebody who can help you get it done right the first time.
Yeah, and the risks of not doing it right are immense.
Well, that's the other thing is even if you pass the test, and let's say you're certified here within the United States to our regulations, and then you try to sell the product in Europe. If you get caught trying to sell that product in Europe and it doesn't meet the EU standards, not only are there fines, but in some cases, depending on the standard, you can also have criminal liability as well, which you definitely don't want.
And you can also, you can also just be X'd out of that market.
Right, X'd out of that market, which is a big deal.
You no longer can sell. It's happened in various European markets where you just aren't allowed to sell your product in that country anymore. There's definitely downsides to this.
Regulations, like it or not, they're there.
Be aware of it.
You have to meet them and partner with somebody who knows the deal.
And speaking of partnering with somebody, and what a coincidence, TÜV Rheinland is actually having an open house at their Pleasanton, California facility, right, not too far from the Bay Area.
Right.
Next Friday, a week from today, October 26th. And the story that TÜV Rheinland gave us has a link, has information about that open house. It's also their 140th anniversary, which is kind of cool. The company's been around for a long time. So check that out. Again, the story's right below the player page there. You can navigate out to, on the player page, you can navigate out to the story. You can navigate out to a registration page to find out more about their open house. Again, it's a week from today, October 26th in Pleasanton, California.
That's right. So, well, I guess we came to the end of our show, didn't we?
We did, but we have
next week.
Stuff next
we have
week.
We have some interesting stories coming up next week. I just want to share.
Tell us all about them. Tell us all about them.
Well, here's the big one. Statistically, you can show that the end of the world is coming.
No.
Yes, you can. Statistics. They'll prove, and statistics never lie. You know that. So there's a great article from Minitab next week, plotting the end of the world.
Wow.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Plotting the end of the world. Sure, there wasn't.
Not plotting like, I mean, plotting isn't plotting the dots.
Plotting the dots. Good stuff.
Also, if you are not a fan of Six Sigma, we've got a great column, editorial opinion piece coming up for you next week from Anthony Burns. Excellent. It's a very good, if you don't like Six Sigma, you want to read it. If you do like Six Sigma,
you'll want to read it.
Yeah, you'll probably be ticked off, but that's okay.
It's food for thought.
And also, we got an interesting article that came in from a new author, an Indian gal in India, who wrote a story on kind of a very common sense way of staying on top of your internal surveillance auditing, how to avoid the hustle and bustle and rushing around all at the end just before your third-party auditor comes in. She's got a great idea for how to stay on top of it so that you could be audited anytime and pass your audit. You could have a surprise audit from your auditor and be guaranteed to pass your third-party audit. And she tells you how to do it. Great story next week.
Good stuff. All right, we got an action-packed week for you. So, so everyone out there, have a great weekend. Come on back and join us next week for another week of QDD and another show of QDL next Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you then.
So long.
Bye.
Thank you.